Last year I made a video talking about Quake Champions and its ability to retroactively regain its lost player base. Unfortunately, and unsurprisingly, Quake Champions hasn't risen to its former glory. In fact, it has gradually lost players over time, which I kinda think was to be expected. The game has had some pretty major changes, which still hasn't been enough to capture an audience of returning players and new players alike. Fundamentally though, the changes that they have added have helped the game overall, but still the game is plagued by an engine that works against the developers and players. Quite literally, the only way I see Champions being able to turn itself around is by spending some time and money recreating the game on their latest id Tech version. But this in itself is a ridiculous request, and by that point it would be better just to make an entirely different game. The foundation might be built upon sand, but at its core, Quake Champions still remains to be liked amongst anyone who plays it. Back when the game was released into early access, it wasn't in a playable state, with a whole slew of balance problems between champions. People rightfully criticized the game, and it took them a year post-beta launch to get the game into a more stable build. By this time, it was already too late, and the majority of new players and Quake players had decided to jump ship to better games. The people who stuck around knew what they were in for though, and defended the game like it was their job. Realistically though, Champions should have been delayed by at least 6 months after its initial closed beta testing phase, so that its engine could be better polished, with champion balancing taking a back seat. 2020 was a big year for the game, both internally and externally. The small indie arena shooter Diabotical released, and within a month roughly, it died out, leaving Champions to finally reign supreme, but by such a small margin that could it really even be considered a victory? Quake Champions finally saw its most requested mode being added, which was Clan Arena, and to my surprise, it wasn't what the game needed and ultimately turned into a dead game mode. However, by this point I was actually pretty happy that they finally started listening to the players, and I honestly thought that it might start turning around for Champions. So that begs the question of, how is Quake Champions in 2021? TLDR, it's fun and playable, still suffering from its problematic engine though. However, with a bit of elbow grease you can fine-tune your game to run as smooth as butter. Some of the biggest things you can do is to make sure you have your PC stable. This could mean messing with XMP, underclocking, etc. Personally, I don't believe that this is a good user experience and shouldn't be something you tell someone who is new to the game. If you are experiencing crashes though, I'd be willing to put money on it being related to their new anti-cheat. With a daily user base of 1,000 players at peak times, you would think the queues would be abysmal. Surprisingly though, I'm waiting about 20 to 30 seconds per queue depending on the amount of servers I have checked off. If I'm running any server under 120 ping, that's usually on the lower end of the queue times, but if I try to optimize my ping for the best experience possible, then I'm looking at 1 to 2 minutes in queue. Duels are still pretty rough though, with queues being upwards of 10 minutes at a time. However, if you're going to play QC, I don't think you should be focusing on ranked play, but more so on DM, TDM, and Unholy Trinity. Quake's strong point has always been to kill an hour or two more so than grind out the game for 10 hours a day in Duel. Also, somewhat to further this point, you get way more experience for the Battle Pass through literally any other mode than Duel. They've also been adding a ton of new weapon skins and multiple maps within the last 2 years of the game. Some of these are better than others, but ultimately it's keeping the game fresh. Personally, I would love to see the introduction of a new champion since our last one was in 2019. You would think the Champions part of the title would indicate that there would be a wide variety of characters. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Regardless, the selection of champions we have now is what we got, and it has been focusing more on balancing out the roster, which has made the game way more viable for duels and 2v2s. There are still some all-arounder characters though, like Galena, Ranger, and Doomslayer, so I recommend if you're new to the game, unlock these characters first. Speaking of which, they have massively updated Doom since his release, adding low health noises and reworking his ability to no longer lock on and track his targets to rip and tear them. Instead, he punches and does a little lunge forward, which gives him overall more mobility. With all the new maps and champion balance, Quake Champions feels like it's nearing the end of its early access. However, this is yet to be seen, considering one of the few people working on the game has been saying that the decision isn't up to him. If Quake Champions had launched in the state it's in now, back in 2017, I guarantee that the game could have been better off. However, there's no real point reminiscing on the could-haves, and instead we should just be focusing on the could-bes. With all that out of the way, I wanted to talk about what a revival of Quake Champions could be at this point. Right now at peak times, Quake Champions has about 1,000 concurrent players. For most of the day though, it sits in the lower end of 500. To actually say that Quake Champions came back from the dead would require, at least in my opinion, a minimum of 1,000 players for the low end and 2,000 at peak times. Even then, this is still a wild ask for QC, and realistically the most we could see is 750 for the lows and 1,200 for the highs. Regardless though, this game is still in a playable and fun state, and it's really worth trying, especially since the developers are dedicated to keeping this game alive for the foreseeable future. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. Also, subscribe if you aren't, and dislike or like the video if you want to. Until next time guys, peace.